Is sumo deadlifting cheating? Now, I'm sure we've all seen the video going around, which I'll put up here.
Why do people consider sumo deadlift cheating? And do you? Well, they consider it cheating because it is cheating.
Of Chris Bumstead, the three-time Mr. Olympia Classic Physique champion, the boy, our man. We all love him. I love him. If you haven't seen the channel before, if you don't follow me on social media, go check it out because he is the man. He is a specimen. However, he recently came out doing a bit of a Q&A saying that he said that he thinks sumo deadlifting is cheating when you compare it to conventional deadlift. That sort of divided a lot of people. We've got a bunch of people like Jeff Nippard, who's full on about the science. Love him as well. Not so much calling him out. No one's sort of great thing. No one's being nasty about it, which has been really good to see. But I don't think, my personal views, before we go into the science of it all, that sumo deadlifting is cheating. So let's jump into it and see what the research says, and let's just make a smart, informed decision about whether it actually is cheating or whether it's not cheating. Let's do it. So, sumo versus conventional deadlift. Let's start with the basic setup for both of these techniques, so that way we can get a better understanding of the biomechanics and how the muscles work in both of these movements. So first we have the sumo deadlift. First we can see the hand positioning. It's sitting that straight down, about shoulder width apart. Arms point straight down, that way we can get the longest lever to get the most leverage for the deadlift. The position of the arms are straight down, about shoulder width apart. That way you do get the longest lever possible to perform the deadlift, to make it the most, to lift the most amount of weight with the least amount of resistance. Next we have probably the most obvious and the biggest change from the conventional to the sumo, and that is the foot position. The feet are placed in a much wider stance. Can be as comfortable as you need to. So there is no exact positioning of the feet in the sumo deadlift. Typically this is you're putting your feet as wide as possible while maintaining a neutral shin position. So your heels and both your knees should be in a line as seen here. Any wider than this, your knees start to sort of come into that sort of 45-degree angle as you're not able to externally rotate your hips. What can also happen is the wider your feet start to go, the more externally rotated your feet start to point out as well. Typically a good reference point is that when your feet do start to turn out and your shin does maintain alignment, you want your feet sort of pointing towards the outside of the plates essentially. So as we all know, the sumo is a massive compound movement, probably the biggest compound movement we have. So the two main functions of the sumo deadlift is we have both hip extension and knee extension as well. So at the hip we have the glutes and the hamstrings both working super hard here, with probably comparing it to the conventional deadlift, a bit more knee flexion as well. Hence why the sumo is sort of renowned for having a lot more of that quadriceps and glute action as well. In terms of isometric and stabilization muscles, you've got your erector spinae, which do activate, plus your lats, your traps. So moving away from the sumo deadlift, we're now going to look at the conventional deadlift. In terms of muscle activation, both are actually very similar. There have been a couple of studies which do show that the sumo deadlift is harder on the quads due to the hips being a bit closer to the bar at the start of the movement, versus the conventional deadlift where the hips are sort of pushed back a little bit further, causing more stress on the hip and the lower back muscle like the erectors. So again, we're starting with the hand position of the conventional deadlift. It can be a little bit wider than seen in the sumo, as we want our hands being on the outside of our knees. These can be just on the outside or a little bit further out, depending on what you feel comfortable with as well. Hands typically put at around shoulder width or just wider than shoulder width apart. And then as we know, the sumo wider stance, so conventional we've got quite a narrow stance. Our feet are generally just closer than hip width apart or slightly closer than shoulder width apart, depends on what your hip shape and stuff is as well. Doing this will help minimize how far the bar has to travel. So if you have a bit of a neutral sort of stance, you're causing that bar to have to travel a lot further versus being in that closer stance position. And also, unlike the sumo deadlift, our toes are pointing straight ahead, as we don't need that external rotation to try to get our hips and our body into that position. So our feet pointed straight ahead and just dropping the hips back as we get into that starting position. Same again as the sumo deadlift, the conventional deadlift is still going to activate the same muscles at the hip, the same muscles at the knee, so the quadriceps, the glutes and your hamstrings. However, like we said, because your hips are further away from the bar at the starting position, your erectors are going to work a little bit harder in the conventional deadlift versus a sumo deadlift. So to pretty much end this silly small debacle that has been going on the internet for a couple of weeks now, you should be doing whatever feels comfortable for you. There is no right or wrong answer. Both have their advantages, both have their disadvantages. It depends what feels comfortable for you. Some people lack the hip mobility and the biomechanical structure to do a sumo or a conventional. Some people even just prefer the feeling of whether their biomechanics suits one or the other. Some people just prefer the sumo, some people just prefer the conventional. It's totally up to you. There is no one is way better than the other. Depending on your muscle and strength goals, it's almost beneficial to do both anyway, to try and maximize the most out of these movements. They both can play a role in increasing their strength in one or the other. So it's a good idea to periodically change the variation of deadlift that you're doing throughout your training cycle. And that, my folks, wraps up today's video. I hope that answers a few questions that people might have been thinking for the last couple of weeks, with people saying sumo's cheating or conventional's cheating, whatever it is, whatever the silly argument is. I think at the end of the day, do what you want. They're both going to have great carryover in terms of strength and muscle size. So that's the end of today's video. Hit the like, hit subscribe button if you haven't already, please. I know a lot of you guys that watch aren't subscribed. It doesn't hurt to hit that little subscribe button. Turn notifications on for when my videos do go live. Going to be trying doing a few more of these like sciencey type videos in the future. I do enjoy them. It forces me to start reading up on some more of the science, which helps in terms of my training as well. And I'll see you all in the next one.
Why do people consider sumo deadlift cheating? Well, they consider it cheating because it is cheating.
Daddy doesn't like that.